Great. I think it's useful to start. Welcome. I hope you've come to the right session. This is the afternoon session on Find Your Regional Hub. I hope you found the right room. Great. This is the session on planetary health, peace and security. And it's wonderful, actually, that the Planetary Health Alliance has formed a session on this. As we know, the Planetary Health Alliance is around solution-focused. It is a social movement. It's a transdisciplinary movement focused not only on analyzing, but addressing what's impacts on human disruption to earth and natural resources. I was reading off my script what exactly the Public Health Alliance is allowed. And it's wonderful that they're having a, because I was just reflecting, today, 8th of October, sitting in Erasmus University. Erasmus was one of the major 15th philosophers on peace. All his teachings on peace are world-renowned. So we are in Rotterdam, the home of Erasmus, who said you shouldn't fight anybody except the Turks. I think it's wonderful. But we are also October the 8th, the day after September. There are people other sides of the world, important peace-building efforts, not only in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Myanmar, I noticed, Sudan, DRC, perhaps in small families there are conflicts. We need peace building. So the whole topic of peace building on October the 8th, the day of this conference, is highly relevant, I believe. And it's wonderful to have a very distinct multidisciplinary panel who I will just introduce to you. The other thing which I was very cognizant of in just introducing this session is that, hopefully the slide will change. Good morning, sir. Okay. That we are at an inflection point in history. The word inflection point has been used by numerous politicians around the world, from not only in the US and the West, and what does an inflection point mean? I think we need to reflect on the inflection point. And in our Common Futures document, the UN Secretary General says that we are an inflection point, our biggest shared test since the Second World War, and that humanity faces stark choice at this time. The choices we make or not to make. We can either make choices for more breakdown or more breakthroughs. As Charles Dickens said, we're in the best of times. Vaccines, life mortality has gone up, children mortality has gone down, wonder drugs. So we are living the best of times, but at the same time, the worst of times in terms of having conflict, pandemics, all sorts of doom and gloom in a world in turmoil. We are at an inflection point. So the big thing for the Planetary Alliance meeting is, what are the decisions we're going to make and why and how? And I think this is very much the focus on what our expert panelists, because the big issue is that issues around climate change, issues around conflict, issues around migration crisis do not fall from the sky. The pandemic did not fall from the sky. Conflicts did not fall from the sky. They're not happenings. They have background issues, why conflict happens. And as public health people, as a Planetary Health Alliance, we need to understand why this is happening, just as much deal with the event. So this time it's not so much around analyzing wars and have we got the best weapons, but it's around why and what we can do about it in terms of the Planetary Alliance. So that's very much going to be looking at the underlying drivers for change and so on. As I said, we've got a wonderful panel who are going to present. How we're going to do it is the panelists will speak for 7-10 minutes. They will all go through their presentation, and then we'll have a conversation, questions, answers, a debate. And hopefully by the next 5 minutes, we can develop an alliance so that as health problems, we have the permission to talk about peace and peace building. It's not a taboo subject for public health people, peace building. At the moment, we talked about evidence. We're very good at generating statistics and facts. But this is not going to change the world. The wonderful statistics we have around climate change, is this stuff really going to change anything? We need to understand the levers for change and actions. So I think it's very, very important for us as the Planetary Health Alliance to be solution-focused. And facts and science will only get us a certain way, and our norms and values and so on. We had a summit on this conversation at the Royal College of Physicians in June. What is actually our culture, norms and values and ethics in a world in turmoil? What's our role as health people? And it's interesting that we had a message. We actually planted a tree at the Royal College of Physicians to say peace is the best medicine. And we were very surprised, the message we had for Dr. Tedros for our special gathering. This is just a 2 minutes video, which I think you'll be interested to hear. Can we have some sound, please? I feel like Trump actually saying I couldn't come to escalator.
Polio emerged in Gaza last year.
Can we start from the beginning, please, sir? We did have a practice run. No, the video before, please, sir. Can we have the video, please? Thank you. No, just let the video run. Just leave the video on, just click on some sound. Just leave it, sound.
Dear colleagues and friends, war and disease are old friends. It's no coincidence that polio re-emerged in Gaza last year, 25 years after the last case was seen there. It's no coincidence that there are outbreaks of measles, dengue, malaria, diphtheria, and cholera in Sudan. It's no coincidence that the final frontier for eradicating polio is in the most insecure regions of Afghanistan and Pakistan. In recent years, we have also seen a disturbing new trend in conflicts around the world, the intentional targeting of health workers and health facilities in conflict. These attacks not only kill and maim, they deprive people of urgently needed care, endanger healthcare providers, and undermine health systems. This year alone, WHO has documented over 500 attacks on healthcare in 13 countries and territories, resulting in over 1,000 deaths and 400 injuries to health workers and patients. These attacks are a violation of international law. Health must never be a target. In conflicts around the world, WHO and our partners are working to support health systems, keep vital supply chains running, and provide essential health services to vulnerable populations. But the one commodity we cannot deliver is the one that people need the most: peace. Because, as you all know, peace is the best medicine. There is no health without peace, and no peace without health. I thank you.
It's a great pleasure now to introduce you to retired General Tom Middentop, a retired 4-star general and former Chief of Defense of the Netherlands. He now serves as chair of the International Military Council on Climate Security, where he is widely known as the Climate General. And for those who have not read his book, as a Climate General, it's very, very important for health colleagues actually to study. For his leadership on peace, security, and sustainability, he brings decades of international experience to today's discussion on how conflict, climate, and human well-being are deeply connected. It's a great pleasure to have our first panelist, retired General Tom Middentop. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to do it without slides, so you have to look at me. Climate general. How do you become a climate general? I'm still wondering how that happened. It wasn't meant as a compliment, by the way. It was meant as a joke. But I decided to embrace that title as a title of honor and to use it, because the title reflects the connection that is there between a changing climate and our security. Like there is a connection between security and health, as just explained. It's all interconnected. And we like to approach things very stovepiped. We put it in sectors and in certain knowledge areas, and we approach it very narrow. But increasingly, we are finding out that the problems are very interconnected. I've been in the military for my whole life. I've been involved in more than 20 crisis areas around the world. I've seen what happens if there is no security. I've seen the devastating impact of that. When security collapses, when health systems break down, when food systems break down, when people have no perspective of life. So I would say war is the biggest enemy of planetary health. And I've also seen and come to a better understanding of what drives war. What are the reasons behind it? And I fully agree with the moderator that we need to understand why. Why is there a conflict? Why is health at stake? And often the reasons are a few layers deeper than you think. And increasingly in those missions, I saw how climate change was playing a role into that. I've seen in Afghanistan, I saw how water scarcity drove farmers to all kinds of tensions because they couldn't agree on the division of water. There was too little water, and they argued about how to divide that. And that gave friction, and the Taliban used that friction to gain leverage over the population. And this is a small example that we see all over the world because we are facing more and more scarcities. And scarcities are being turned into weapons for many parties. I've seen that in Iraq, where Daesh occupied the Mosul Dam and instrumentalized water and access to water to gain leverage over the population. I've seen it in Somalia, where poor farmers were pushed into piracy because they couldn't make a living anymore. I've seen it in Mali, where they were pushed into extremism. So in many regions in the world, we see the impacts, we see insecurity growing, driven by a changing climate. And when I return then in our own countries, I feel very rich. And we don't often realize how rich we are, but we are children of a golden age. We are children of an age with an abundance of resources, with an abundance of all the facilities that we could wish. And for us, it's normal. We complain if it's not there, but it's not normal. We are in the most prosperous period in history, I would say. And that's unique. Maybe in 10 years, 20, 30 years' time, we look back at this period as the golden age. But I'm afraid every age ends at some moment. And I think we start realizing that we have entered a new age. A new age, which is kind of a more systemic shift. If you look at the current conflicts, Ukraine, Gaza, in Sudan, all over the world, I think we should not make the mistake as regarding them as incidents. They are symptoms. They are symptoms of what's changing in the world. 2.2 degrees warming, and we are now heading for that direction, is not a midpoint. It's a worst-case readiness scenario looking at it from a security perspective, leading to constant crisis management. Tens of millions of displaced people, flooded coastlines, collapsed harvests, all feeding instability. Last year I was in Somalia for the filming of this book, and I saw deserted inlands, deserted villages, deserted farmlands. People were all moving to the cities. If you look at the northern Africa, the Middle East, but also in South Asia, cities are booming. Because people cannot make a living anymore in the ways their ancestors did. In this world, we are growing towards a population of 10 billion people, almost doubling in size this century. That's a huge growth, which means a growing demand for water, for food, for space. At the same time, we are facing increasing resource scarcity, so we are running into the planetary boundaries. And that gives all kinds of scarcities. And scarcities give tensions, and tensions lead to conflicts. That's what's happening at the moment. And that's happening in a world that is becoming more and more fragmented, a more power play world, where everybody wants to secure access to those scarcities. And I'm afraid that competition will only toughen, will create more tensions and more conflicts. And in the background, climate is changing. And climate is kind of fueling that process. It is accelerating the tensions that we're already witnessing. And that's the challenge I think we are facing, and it has a lot of impacts. If I just look at the climate change impact, it drives people into despair. In Somalia, 2/3 of the whole population is minor, 2/3. And they cannot make a living the way their parents did. What choices do they have? They move to the cities, cannot find work. How can they make a life? And in your desperation, you make desperate choices. And then they are very susceptible for criminality, for migration flows, for extremism, and it creates all kinds of tensions and instability. And we see that happening all over the world, in different, especially the fragile regions around the world, that are very susceptible for that. And I think it's our obligation to face that, to look it in the eyes, and to take that very seriously. This is not a very optimistic story, but I'm not a pessimist. I'm a firm believer in our ability to survive, a firm believer in our ability to find new solutions. My concern is more about the urgency. I don't have the feeling that we all feel the urgency enough. And that's what I try to do from my role as a climate general. I try to bring that urgency on the table from a security perspective and show that economy, security, climate change is interrelated with each other and that you cannot rule that out. You can say climate is a woke issue, denying the problem, but you will be facing it and you will be facing the consequences. So denying it is not a solution. And I think there are several forecasts, pathways to follow, and then I will close. The first one is forecasting, and there we also need the science. We need the science to better understand, and there is a lot of science on the topics that I just described. And we never in our history did we have so much knowledge in advance of what we are facing as we have now. So it's not just about knowledge, it's about using that knowledge to anticipate, to design solutions and become more, as said, more solution-oriented. Not just investigate it, no, translate it. Translate it into solutions. But to find those solutions, you need to really understand the deeper layers of what we are facing. So that's mission number 1 for all of us. Mission number 2 is that we breach the stovepipes. Health is not just a health issue. Climate is not just a climate issue. Security is not just a security issue. They are very interrelated with each other, which means that the solutions are also interrelated, which means that we need to reach out to each other, understand what drives us, and look for the win-win situation. Where's the common ground that we can move forward? We are all parts of a solution, but none of us is the solution. So we have to make those parts fit. And the third one would be innovation. If we focus our innovation on ways to become less dependent on scarcities, which means innovating on circularity, lifetime extension, on use of alternative materials that are not scarce, then we take away a lot of roots of future conflicts. It's future-proofing ourselves. So innovation can be a large part of the solution, also on the health area. Can help us become more climate resilient, especially in those countries that are stricken by a changing climate. So for me, security and adaptation are two sides of the same coin, whether we like it or not. Thank you very much.
Indeed. As you know, you've learned so far, there is a Slido code here. Please put your questions, comments, and so on. It apparently appears on our magic phones, and we can discuss with them later on. It's a pleasure now to have an online presentation by Professor Fukuhiro Yoshida, who's a professor and director of research for nuclear weapons abolition at Nagasaki. And this is a very poignant presentation because this is the 40th anniversary, I think, I understand, Professor, of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and so on. And the professor is also editor-in-chief of the Journal for Peace and Nuclear Disarmament by Taylor Francis. So his publications are actually highly poignant for our particular journal. Welcome, Professor Yoshida. It's over to you. Thank you.
Very much kind introduction. My name is Fumi Yoshida. That was in Nagasaki University. Now I'm in Nagasaki. It's nearly midnight, but I'll do my best. Let me share my slide. Can you see it?
It's perfect.
Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can. You see your slide.
Thank you very much indeed. Just go ahead, please.
Yes. Now, well, today's my topic is about the nexus between nuclear weapons and planetary health. I don't know how much the Planetary Health Alliance has discussion about this nexus, but I presume not many of the sessions so far have done about a discussion about this theme. So let me try to explain the basic issues, which I should say. Well, today the outline is at the beginning, I will explain global nuclear weapons stockpile today. Then I move to some assumptions. If nuclear weapons are used, what will happen globally and regionally? And also risk of nuclear war due to global warming. So it's vice versa. Well, today we have about more than 10,000 nuclear warheads owned by 9 states. And if we categorize those nuclear warheads, then it can be divided to three categories, as you see. And if we count just deployed warheads and reserved warheads, means already operational or can be operational in a short time. If we just pick up 2 categories, we need to admit that what is going on is actually nuclear arms race. This shows the trend. Since 2018 until this year, basically the trend is the increase of nuclear warheads stockpile in the world. If we just count 2 categories, those important categories. This shows country by country. The red figure says in last 6 or 7 years, we have seen increase of those usable nuclear warheads. And US and France and Russia are almost flat, but others, especially in Asia, including in India, Pakistan, China, and the DPRK, they have been expanding their nuclear stockpiles very, very quickly. So that means those new, the emerging risks are spreading in this region. It means higher risk of nuclear exchange. Okay. Until last year, my research center, RECNA, together with other collaborating institutes, we did a 3 years project. And in the first year, we identified 25 use cases, plausible nuclear use cases in this region. And second year, we selected 5 cases out of 25 cases. And we just focused on limited use of nuclear weapons. Single detonation through 24 nuclear detonations. Considering a total nuclear warhead, 24 is still just a small portion of all nuclear warheads. But even 24 use in this region can make a serious damage. This also shows explains how each case can bring casualties. The worst case in 5 scenario is the bottom one. Case 5, that means 24 nuclear warheads would be used due to the conflict with the United States and China about Taiwanese area. So due to fire and blast pressure, the immediate death could be 2.6 million people. That is 35% of the residents in those areas. And as you can see in the right, we will have more additional casualty due to radiation and delayed diseases. So means so-called limited nuclear use can be a serious public threat and possibly regional public threat. That is the implication of the study, I think. And next slide shows just an image of spread of nuclear radioactivity in this region in case of 24 explosions. Well, let's move to the global implication. The one which I described previously, in this limited nuclear war, the nuclear states, its assumption is they target just military facilities, not cities. But in this scenario, war between India and Pakistan, they use 250 nuclear weapons, targeting cities in their territories. Then what will happen is this study. And what they found is if 25 nuclear weapons are used against big cities in these two countries, then a large amount of smokes, which include black carbon, will be created. Then it's going to be carried up to the high atmosphere, where the clouds and the precipitation does not appear. Those, the phenomenon comes in the lower atmosphere, such as troposphere. Then the implication is those are the carbon which stays in higher atmosphere will blanket the Earth for years, then reduce the sunlight coming into the surface of the Earth. That brings a lower temperature in the atmosphere. Global temperature will be down by 3 to 6 degrees in over a decade. This is the kind of simulation done by scientist team, mainly US scientists. The lower temperature is almost equivalent to the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, 2,000 years ago. This is a still small group analysis, so it is not yet well defined. But now the UN panel was established, and they are working on more elaborately what will happen after nuclear war. Small, limited nuclear use cases, or more nuclear use cases, or total the nuclear exchange. And the short period, mid-term period, and long-term consequences. They are analyzing it. Health, environment, and also political and economic and social systems. They will look at all these aspects, and they will show us a conclusion almost nearly 2 years later. So anyway, now let us move to the risk of nuclear war due to global warming. As you know, previous speaker pointed out, Mr. Climate Change, as he pointed out, the climate change can be a cause of the many conflicts. One of the reasons is the water shortage. And we look at the case of China, India, Pakistan. Those three countries depends on the rivers that is coming from, those are coming from glaciers in Himalayan mountains, and the glaciers, many of them are, stay in Chinese territory. And the fresh water coming from these glaciers sustains livelihood of hundreds, millions of people in the downstream. And once global warming, and it's severe, if it is severe, that can cause a shortage of fresh water in each of these countries. And as you know, that these three countries are nuclear-armed states. Then those three countries have water shortage problems and face to the conflict, local conflict, because of the competition to get more water. It can be a trigger of more bigger the military confrontation, and finally could be a trigger nuclear war, even though it could be small, but nobody knows. So those assumptions, those scenarios is probability of the breakout, those scenarios in the real world is very, very low. But once those takes place, the seriousness is quite high. So when we think about planetary health, sustainable planetary health, we cannot, ignore the risk of nexus between nuclear war and climate change.
Thank you very much.
We have not yet well explored this area, but is the areas we should pay more attention and more human resources to work on it.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Yoshida. Thank you. It's getting a bit scary now, but I think it's a great pleasure to now invite to speak Professor Beverly Longit, who's a indigenous leader around the world. She's an Igorot belonging to the Bontoc people, and I'm sure she'll describe her heritage at the beginning of her speech and do a much better job than I. She's the National Alliance organization leaders of various organizations across the world. She's a newly elected chairperson of the Asia Indigenous People Pact, a regional organization advancing the rights and interests of indigenous peoples across the world, and we're very honored to have her part of our panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gawis ay agaw, kanda ako amin. That's warmest greetings in my native language. And I think, unlike many of you who are here, I am a newbie, a green apple in this planetary health discourse as it is framed today. As I listened to the discussions yesterday and today, I realized how close planetary health is to the principles and values of indigenous peoples encapsulated in our worldview, land is life. I speak as an indigenous people's human rights defender, one who has faced threat, harassment, intimidation from state security forces for standing for what I believe is people's rights. I have also witnessed the realities of war, displacement, and environmental destruction in several indigenous territories across countries. And I ask myself in all of this experience, is there a nexus between peace and planetary health? What are the roots of conflict and wars? From an indigenous and planetary perspective, conflict and wars are not random, never is. They are inflicted on us and driven by historical and continuing colonialism, shaped by political and economic interests. And this colonial legacy, unfortunately, continues today through resource exploitation, land dispossession, and environmental destruction, which fall most heavily on indigenous peoples and other working peoples. So until we name these truths, we cannot hold the right actors accountable to what we call planetary destruction. So when mines, big mines, poison rivers, when dams dry up watersheds, when farmlands are seized by monocrop plantations or so-called green and renewable energy projects, when forests are cleared for tourism or gigantic infrastructures, these do not simply harm the land. They destroy lives. They displace communities, deepen hunger, and ignite tensions that often erupt into violence. When people assert their right to self-determination, more often than not, these are met with militarization, state brutality, and heinous violations of human rights. And because conflicts are also international, there are also violations of international humanitarian law. So if communities resist and take up arms to defend their land, often they are labeled as terrorists and face annihilation. But when governments or states drop bombs, like in Gaza, in Yemen, West Papua, the Philippines, and other places, this is called world peace, isn't it? And these realities are something that we need to confront when we demand justice or accountability. And we have seen this clearly from indigenous peoples, our ancestral domains, where development often walks hand in hand with militarization when we say no to dams, no to mines, or when we say our lands are not for sale. And when armed conflict erupts, the wounds are doubled. Militarization, as the climate general has said, pollutes ecosystems, They also uproot communities and destroys traditional governance systems that have long sustained peace and balance. Displacement breaks our ties to the land. Ecological destruction erodes our resilience to climate change, and the cycle of violence leaves both people and the planet weaker. We also know from experience that the climate stress and insecurity reinforces each other. Extreme weather and scarcity force communities into competition, especially when governance is weak and the exclusion is deep. More than 2 billion people live in fragile and conflict-affected areas, and the climate crisis worsens their condition. And more often than not, it determines whether families can eat, it determines if children can learn, or can the youth see the future. So women, youth, and indigenous peoples bear the heaviest burdens, yet they are also the bearers of solutions rooted in knowledge, resilience, and solidarity. This is why, as a matter of resolution, probably in this conference, intergenerational dialogue and women and youth participation must be at the heart of peace building, climate action, and planetary health. Now, we often speak of peace, but we have many definitions of peace, and we often say peace is not merely the absence of war. But we must ask, what kind of war are we ending? And what kind of peace are we building? Today's wars are wars for global dominance and hegemony, wars of aggression for geopolitical and economic control, while the competition for human and natural resources lies at the center of these wars and conflict. True peace, or a just and lasting peace, is not the silence of guns, but the presence of balance. Balance among human communities, balance between humanity and nature. Peace means we can freely practice our traditions. Our ancestral lands are grow and enhance and pass on indigenous knowledge systems that have always protected biodiversity and sustained life. Without peace, indigenous peoples cannot fully play our role as stewards of the earth. Now, going to my conclusion, we must also confront greenwashing, where states and corporations hide extractive and militarized agenda behind this so-called green, climate, and world peace rhetoric. We should be able to go beyond the terms. War and militarization are not just social tragedies, they are ecological crimes, destroying the very planet we depend on. Consider this: the cost of a single bomb, whether it's in Gaza or elsewhere, can range from $25,000 to $500,000. Funds that could instead restore forests, sustain communities, or feed the hungry. Always, oppression breeds resistance, and with resistance breeds change. A peaceful and secure world is essential for the well-being of both humans and the environment. Equally, a healthy planet is crucial for peace. When forests thrive and the rivers flow freely, when the air is clean and the soil is productive, conflicts diminish. But it does not end with abundance. When communities have safe homes and have equitable access to clean water, air, food, and secure lands, there is less space, or probably there would be no space, for violence to grow. If planetary health is about protecting the systems that sustain life, then peace must be in the central to its vision or to its agenda. We must recognize that defending the earth and advancing peace are inextricable. They are conjoined. No? Let us act with urgency, but at the same time, let us act with respect and solidarity to heal, to regenerate, not only for our people, but also our planet. Iswis, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed. Our final distinguished speaker is Jose Pablo Quinos, who is actually a distinguished lawyer. He works as a senior officer at the International Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Prize Laureates, coordinating a new international Nobel Peace Summit Center for Peace Education and the Mexican and Latin American Youth Engage Program, which is highly relevant for our conversation. Welcome, Pablo. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I think that it's a big honor to be here representing our organization and also sharing this important panel with these relevant people and persons. And I'm not want to be the romantic part of this panel, but I'm going to talk about, when I received the starting question of this panel, what is the intersection between peace and the planetary health? We immediately thought about peace education because it's one of the main tasks that we do since the 90s. And briefly, I'm going to explain a little bit about our organization because we are not the Nobel Committee. We don't give the Nobel Peace Prizes in its 6 categories. We are a platform for the Nobel Peace Laureates. Almost the entire, all the recipients of the Nobel Peace Award have worked with us throughout almost 25 years. Since our inaugural edition in the 90s in the city of Rome, the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureate has emerged as a unique international event dedicated to fostering global peace, uniting Nobel Peace Prize laureates and influential figures across political, business, spiritual, social, scientific, etc. We serve as a dynamic platform for dialogue. I can mention relevant for this meeting, this annual meeting, our remarkable collaboration with the Nobel Award organizations like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, the IPNW, the Pugwash Conference on Science and World Affairs, Red Cross International, and the Friends Service, the American Friends Service Committee. Our permanent goal has been to translate their message of peace into dynamic and tangible education with local and international new engaged initiatives, addressing the most difficult challenges that our planet is facing. Of course, the environmental ones is our priority. These challenges were not impossible to tackle without the participation of the young people. For this reason, in 2012, we launched our youth program called the Leading by Example that has been a safe space for youth to connect with the legacy of the Nobels and to propose peace projects to create long-term solutions and opportunities to tackle interdisciplinary issues. By the way, I am aware we could spend hours talking about the outcomes, the goals, and the achievements of 25 years of connection between Nobels and their actions related to the planetary health and youth. But this will be definitely in another time. Also because it's a fact that not just the Peace Nobel Awards speak about peace, also the Nobel in physics, economics, chemistry, literature, etc. For our youth program, but our youth program has evolved. And now we are, as our moderator told, we are navigating through the new strategies, such as the opening of our first international Nobel Peace Summit Center for Education, including since 2020, the Resistance Mission Challenge project, which is a non-formal educational project with a solid component of social entrepreneurship and conflict resolution with community social impacts at the very grassroots level, which is very important for us to work at the very grassroots level to the top. Involving youth in violent zones or youth living in indigenous communities. After 3 generations, and it was a surprise for us after analyzing the data, almost 600 students have been graduated for our Misión Resistencia Challenge project. And we saw that our participants decided to develop environmental projects above other topics. Almost 60% of the entire youth initiatives have been inspired for the planetary health concept by its own initiative, without a mandatory task, and are just united by a particularly common sense of their roots. This peace educational component has the philosophy to provide affordable, feasible, and verifiable information to our students, which match perfectly with the opportunity to the planetary health movement to include successful models or improve their currently models of youth engagement. But this is the part that is very important also for us to remark this evening, the threat. The threat for a peace education, and is absolutely related with this panel. And I'm going to talk about our Mexican experience because I'm the person on program. I'm the person in charge of this Mexican and Latin American program with the youth. The threat to the peace education, and also I ask your help to figure it out how we can do, is how to foster youth peace and planetary health awareness and education, avoiding the risk that it represents for the present and the youth generations. And I'm going to point directly for the institutions or persons that we have seen that are a danger for our peace education programs. The corruption, it's necessary to mention this word, the corruption of the government, the human insecurity, the currently and permanently dehumanization happening in regional, local, and international level. And I needed to share this awful and disgusting project with you. Maybe many of them are informed, but for a big example that the peace educational makers face is, for example, the Mexican Mayan train. This experience with this awful project has shown us all the threats of peace, that all the threats of peace can be shamefully at the same time and beyond the boundaries we thought were inviolable. Collective trauma, ecocide, the permanent militarization of the rural and indigenous communities that before that they used to live in freedom, and they are not living in freedom anymore. The authoritarian governments, like the Mexican government, ready to cross all the lines to achieve their own interests, even if they need to sacrifice our natural resources and, for example, pollutes the water of our ancestors, the dispossession on the land of territories of the Mayan communities, etc. And I need to be very clear in this international panel and forum, the Mexican government has been violating and is still violating the national and international law publicly with this project without any political or legal consequences at this moment. But the most sad thing is that we already have many irreversible social and environmental impacts. And it could be just an example that other similar projects and impacts that are happening across the world. But again, it's just an example because our work is there. Mexico, like other countries, is not only one of the most biodiverse countries in the Americas continent, it's also among the most dangerous place for being human rights and climate change activists. The organization Global Witness documented over 50 murders of Mexican environmental defenders in 2021, and this number has been increasingly each year. So basically, being a human environmental activist is one of the most dangerous jobs in our country. Mexico was also the world's most dangerous country for being a journalist in 2022, just behind the war zones in currently conflicts like Ukraine, Gaza. As a result, the risks and threats affecting Mexican environmental defenders are severely underreported. International sustainability policies and environmental norms appear powerless to protect Mexican and international indigenous environmental defenders, of course the youth also, from the relentless enroachment of actors, including private sector, government officials, and the organized criminal networks. In our last World Nobel Peace Summit in Monterrey, Mexico, Dr. Jans Fromo, member of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and also member of the International Campaign Against the Nuclear Weapons, called to action saying, young people need to have access to education without repression and punishment. And this is the thing that has inspired our conclusion. With a free peace education as a tool to foster planetary health, with the following characteristics: affordable and easy understandable. Colleagues, we can't assume that all the people understand the same concepts about planetary health or environmental. We need to return, at least from my experience, from our experience, to the very grassroots levels. More when we live now in a very social media era, when a lot of youngest and young people are frustrated about the situation that is happening, and their own interests has changed. They are not longer materialist. They are non-materialist. They have non-materialist values like environmental issues, like mental health, like LGBTQ rights, etc. We inspire other characteristic that we call is that the peace education should be without public repression or punishment and not representing a danger to people's life. Also, we would add diplomatic training for young people. With these tools, we think young people can learn to resolve conflicts with words instead of violence, communicate effectively, and become influential voices for peace, delivering powerful messages without distorting their meaning. Martin Luther King Jr., the Nobel Peace Prize, said, "Where do we go from here?" I said, we must mobilize the next generation. Dr. King also said, true peace is not the simple absence of tension, but it is the presence of social justice. I said, people around the world cannot think or be part of the planetary health system if they don't have the minimum elementary human conditions to exist. Let's think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, panelists, providing different perspectives. I'd like to now actually go and to consider the questions. I seem to have I lost my Slido? I seem to have lost my Slido. But there were two questions. There were two questions on the two related questions. One, very, very important question. One, if I remember, which was the most voted one, is as a male-dominated, thank you very much indeed, as a male-dominated panel, which I think is a good observation. We weren't responsible for setting up this panel, by the way. And the audience actually is female-dominated. So I think, but the question is very relevant because the status of women is fundamental to peace building. There's a lot of good academic research around that. But the question goes beyond that. It's a male-dominated, what is your responsibility as men, as people, to create a more peaceful communities, given the statistics on perpetrators of violence? And a related question is the notion, is the scarcity causes conflict is one thing, but what about greed and gender? From where I sit, a lot of greedy old men. But I think these are serious questions in terms of the world we live in and the turbulence we live in. And I think it'd be good, rather than having the set questions, reflect on this one question. And the second question is, what does all this mean for our Planetary Health Alliance? And what can we actually develop? So let's consider the first question first, perhaps. Perhaps starting with the general. The first order is no, I'm not saying you're the greedy old men, but I mean, let's go to... But there is a narrative in the political sphere about this, and I think it's a very real thing in terms of leadership. If you could set this up, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Yeah. General climate change, come on.
Can you rephrase that question, please?
The question is largely about, there's quite clearly women's issues are fundamental to peace, and what are we going to do about this? I think that is a reality thing. And you've also highlighted the issue of scarcity, and I think the question is dead on. The question is not around scarcity, but around greed and abuse of our planet's resources. So there are two aspects.
Yeah. Well, yeah, scarcity kind of feeds greed. If there's a lot of scarcity, there are people who want to have more of it to protect their own interests. So it kind of reinforces each other. But on the women participation side, I fully agree. And I've seen that in the mission areas as well. Half of the population is female, the other half is men. So it doesn't make sense to approach it just from a male side. You have to approach it balanced. And females in different societies play different roles. And if you don't take that into account, if you don't use the knowledge that they can bring to the table, the influence that they can bring to the table, you're handicapped on beforehand. So it's foolish to rule them out, and it's smart to include them. That would be my solution, and that's what we also try to do in our armed forces, to include as much women as possible, and also use in the crisis areas that we go to, use the power of women that are in those areas. Often they run the local economies, they run the local farms and the households. They determine education, for instance. So they play a very big role in the solution side, and I think we often underestimate that role. So I can only agree with the conclusion that was being said.
Beverly, do you want me to come?
Well, thank you, General. That was quite a surprise that you have. I didn't expect a general to be supportive of women's rights and inclusion. But I think going back to the issue of greed, sometimes it's not only a question of gender, because there are also women who are greedy. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it boils down on the kind of interest that you espouse. Are you for people? Are you for planet? And sometimes the gender lines get to be blurred. But definitely, women can contribute probably more than men in so many aspects, as you have mentioned, because even the running of the households, child rearing, and all of this, I mean, the perspective of women is quite different. But we can also include others like the youth, people with disability, LGBTQI. We all have a say, but at the end, what interest or what class do you belong to that you are espousing?
Yes, definitely. I would say that in our experience, the women are the population that most participate in all our programs, and we are not, we don't use like a specific strategy to achieve of course, we have transversal equity gender policies in our institution, but it has been a very, I'm not going to say surprise, but it's very, very a good sense for us to, for example, in this resistance mission project that approach and addresses youth living in the indigenous zones and in conflict zones, in specific in Mexico, it's very inspirational to see that almost the 80% of our fellows are women and youth. And other thing that is more interesting, and I share in the pre-conference session that we have discovered that the teenagers have a lot to contribute to this discussion, and also the young women teenagers. So the worst thing that could happen in these discussions, also in the planetary health discussion, is to be adult-centric. I don't know if this is the correct concept in English. Being adultocentric. It's correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, my Mexican Spanglish. But we need to be human-based centric and allow to youth people to speak, and not to think that they are not ready to, or they are not prepared to follow us in this fight.
Thank you. Professor Isha, did you have anything to add to this, or you're happy with the panel's response?
Yes. In my field means the nuclear disarmament areas, the diversity is very important. More diverse views, interests, and background should be reflected in the discussion in this field, and especially about the effect of radiation. That the female body has its own different effect, has a different effect compared to the male bodies. So in that sense also, the gender issue is very important in the discussions. And another one is a kind of also the diversity is not only, as already mentioned, just a gender issue. It should be more diverse religious, ethnic, and also gender point of view are also important.
Thank you very much indeed. I think this goes beyond representation. There's a lot of literature, actually, that women have a particular important role, and we are actually planning to have a webinar specifically on importance of women and peace building. I think it's more than having 50-50 representation. University of Maryland has done a lot of research on this, and I think it's good to collaborate with Planetary Health Alliance. This is not just about representation, having a black and a white, but I think women have a particular contribution, which is unique, and as you know, the WHO Economic Unit is only women, and what they've considered is actually quite new way of thinking, and I think we need that in terms of peace building. The issue of greed, I think a lot of people have been scared to talk about, but it's fundamental to the Planetary Health Alliance. It is fundamental, the issues of our values around overconsumption, greed, and the Western views around this, and the indigenous views around whether we should talk about scarcity or around greed is again an important consultation around that. The other question which has come up is quite a diverse community, is what do each of the panel from their perspectives, for example, think about a specific contribution from their perspectives for the Planetary Health Alliance if we're going to take this issue of peace and security forward. For example, what does a plant health-eccentric agenda and in terms of peace and security would mean from your perspective? What does indigenous involving that, what does the post-laureate education program lead? And for example, in terms of disarmament and so on, what does it mean? So it'd be useful if each of the panel could share with the Planetary Alliance what does it mean from each of your perspective. And I think we'll go in the reverse order this time. Would you like to share your perspective? You want to think about it? Okay, Beverly, would you like to?
Okay, but I just wanted to add on the issue of scarcity. I would agree that there's an abundance, but we would have to look on what makes these resources scarce, because it's also a question of access. No, because majority of the people do not have access to these resources that they need to be. And unfortunately, it's because, again, of political and economic interest that controls these resources. I mean, if you don't have money, I mean, you can't buy probably the quality food that we have, and because also of control on food production, the quality of food also impacts. So everything, no? And even now, even public entitlements, I mean, it's already controlled by big interests. Now, from the perspective of indigenous peoples, sometimes it's a question of sharing, no? The principle of always stating that we are stewards of the land, we are not owners of the land, and it's because something that you do not own, but you have to take care of, not only for today, but for future generations. So that's a principle, I think, that we should be able to imbibe. And two is not only sharing, but sharing for the common good. I think that's something that we will have to go back. I've always said that maybe this time, with all of this development, we need to go back to basics, go back to the roots. Things that we have forgotten, things that capitalism, greed, and everything has diminished throughout. So for me, that's something that we can do, and maybe the Planetary Health Alliance can, in the next session, can invite more indigenous peoples, more people from the workers, the labor unions, more women from the grassroots to also speak out, no? Because we might not be scientists or formally educated in schools, but there is some science in what we are doing, and the fact is the remaining biodiversity all over the world are indigenous people's territories. So we must be doing something right? And that's something that I think that indigenous peoples can very well share to the planetary health movement and to everybody.
Would you like to?
Yeah, it makes me feel very humble. But I think you're right. We should relearn how to work together, how to work as a community. We are a global community. So let's act as a community. So I can fully agree with that. Looking at what the military can bring to the table on planetary health, they can bring destruction to the table if used wrongly, but they can also bring solutions to the table. I think the military can help to create forecasting. If we realize that the climate change and the problems that I described are driving future conflicts, then it makes it very important also for intelligence communities to look at the root causes and to better understand the root causes. And by doing that, they can help predict the effects of what we are seeing. And that creates forecasting, and that allows us to get ahead of the game. And I think the military can help build that forecasting. They will not do the whole forecasting. We need all the scientific elements in that, but they can do part of that forecasting. The second thing is they can help adaptation. War brings destruction, but security brings adaptation. So we need security. And we need to bring security, and the military can help build that security in the right way, of course. But there is no development, there is no adaptation without security, and we do need to realize that. And the third thing, I think, is about mitigation. I think the military can also be a platform for innovation. The new innovations on minimizing our footprints, minimizing the use of all kinds of resources are also very attractive for the military because it can help them become more autonomous in their operations. They don't need big logistical supplies if they can support themselves. So they can be a driver for that kind of innovation. I think that's what they can bring to the table. Thank you.
Yes, for sure. Regardless the militarization, I come from Mexico when the militarization has exceeded their duties. The militarization basically has, the militaries has take control of every civil task that they supposed are not able, even under our constitution, to do. And it has represent missing people, network between, again, it's very important to mention the word corruption, that the corruption happens in all the world. Of course, I'm talking about Mexico because I'm from Mexico, but the corruption has allowed the many things that have been allowed between the militarization that affects the youth, and most the youth indigenous people that has been displaced because I think that the militarization in the wrong hands of the politicians of my country, in my country perspective, and also with the perspective of our organization, is a very risk for the planetary health. And another thing that I wanted to say is about, my dad is a Mayan person, and he told me that to share in this conference that people, maybe we are all the people in this hall, we are experts or we are interested in the concepts, the environmental concept of planetary health concepts, but in the very grassroots level, we have forgotten in the schools, at least in the developed countries. Of course, I can't speak on behalf of developing countries because I attend a very challenging area in Latin America and Mexico, but we have forgotten to keep educating the basic concepts of environmental. We assume that all the youth know what is biodiversity, what is resilience, what is water pollution. We have seen, it's totally normal that we are, as you can saw in the images, the militaries are destroying our forest. It's normal because they are giving us jobs, so it's normal. No, we have forgotten. We need to return to the worst thing that we can do is to assume that the youth or the people in general, at the very grassroots level, and also in the top level, are aware about these elementary concepts. And it's a very wisdom word from my dad, that is an indigenous person.
Thank you for the Mayan wisdom. Professor Yoshida, do you have any comments on this issue?
Yes, as I said, the UN independent science panel is working on consequences of a nuclear war. So the expert community in the planetary health had better to think how to contribute this UN panel from planetary health perspective. So far, I don't think they have enough information or knowledge about it. So we had better commission some study groups to give some report from the PHA perspective to the press it to the UN panel in 2 years, in 1.5 years.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We have a lot of questions. There are questions around NATO and all that, but I don't want to surprise you with such questions. And I think as a health community, we need to have permission now to consider peace and peacemaking as part of agenda, because as the General said, it is a multiplier. Climate change, peace, the pandemic, all these things are related. They don't fall out of the sky, and they have underlying causes, and we love our initial drivers and our social determinants of health and all this sort of thing. But I think we need to now develop educational programs and all this, and hopefully this workshop has provided. I wonder if any one person from the audience, which allow, has a particular passionate comment we like before we wrap up, because we need to be punctual and go away. Because I said to the panel that I was going to do this at the end, because, and we don't want to have a question on a debate on Gaza or anything like that, because there's enough fighting and debate going on around these very, very critical issues. But I'm just wondering, one person, if I could, okay, you've only got one hand, so, perhaps I should pick a woman's hand, because there's a man and a woman, and now in the light of the important topic, if you could keep it brief, we could have both of your comments. There is a roving microphone. I will probably allow both of you, because I've been allowed 5 minutes to wrap up. I'll shut up and don't wrap up very quickly. So please, if you could just briefly share whatever you'd like to share. And then I'll also ask our brilliant storyteller expert to also say very briefly. Thank you. You're on.
Good afternoon. I'm Aldith Buckland. There's a verse in the scripture. Lord says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are my ways your ways. For as my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, so are my ways higher than your ways. We think differently. We have different agendas. We have to use wisdom and know what we want as an outcome. And we also got to have a perception of what the other one has as their outcome and have a discussion. The lady said very clearly, intergenerational communication. She's right. Because once we have that communication and good communication, not bullying, but respectful communication, we will really go far, even with a terrorist.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Perhaps the gentleman in the front could also. Thank you for that.
So my name is Manish Junaid. I'm actually writing an article at the moment on avoiding war by investing in food, energy and water security for a Middle East publication. But my thought was, when the panel's repeated next time or at another event, to have somebody from a defense company that makes tanks or ammunition here, only to ask them, what's your business model for moving away from making tanks or weapons, etc., and turning your company into one that invests in food, water and energy security, which is also a form of defense?
Very helpful. We've actually done this in another workshop, and the conversation is very, very fruitful. Thank you very much. I wish we had more time, actually, because the comments from the floor are really powerful and useful. So, to be disciplined, I'd just like to thank all the participants, and I'd like to, on your behalf, thank the wonderful panel we've had. As a child, I remember my father went to Japan, and he took me a picture of a plaque which was on the Hiroshima place where there was a bomb. And it said this plaque, which was actually quoted 3 years ago when Médecins Sans Frontières won the Nobel Peace. It says, we know 100 times more than what we know. What we lack is the ability to be moved by what we know. So as scientists, we know 100 times what we know to know. What we lack is the ability to be moved by what we know. The next steps for this particular agenda is have conversation with the Planetary Alliance, other health movements. We're doing a series of webinars, conversations, and 2 face-to-face meetings in Geneva and in Belgrade around what are the underlying determinants. One of them will be actually around role of women in peace and peace building, but it's also around racism, and it's all around methodologies. And we will share that through the Planetary Health Alliance, because as a health family, as a scientific family, we do need to now consider it, because as a crisis multiplier, climate change causes conflict. Conflict, as we know in the Syrian district, causes climate change. Gender inequalities causes conflict. conflict, as we know, in Ethiopia causes. So we are in a world where we need to understand our new reality and look for a new solution. And I welcome you to this series. We're doing it next year because it's the 40th anniversary of the UN Year of Peace, if you know, 1986. So it's the 40th anniversary. So with WHO and other international partners, we want to have the health community. So thank you very much indeed once again to the panelists, and particularly for the, I was going to say Public Health Alliance, for the Planetary Health Alliance for enabling this important conversation to begin. So please join your hands and thank the panelists for this. Thank you very much, Professor Yoshida. Thank you.